Welcome to this month's audio workshop. This is Dr. Mike Bucknell, and this month we're going to talk about ADHD, or at least that's what we know it as. Guys, I want to cover this because we're in the summer months, and of course, during the summer, we hear something fairly consistently along the lines of parents saying, when they do have their kids on medication for ADHD, typically in the summer, they say, well, we're going to go ahead and get the kid off of the medications for the summer. So, I want to tackle that from a couple different sides. First of all, from the standpoint of the parent, from the parent's perspective, they're like, well, we've got more time to spend with the kids, and and we're going to be able to do more stuff, and it's not really as necessary for them to focus. They can kind of go wild and do whatever because hey, it's summer. But from a doctor's perspective, I want to look at it from a slightly different angle in that if why exactly does a parent take their kid off of a medication in the summer if they don't necessarily need to be on it, in terms of, well, why would we take it off of it if we didn't know inherently that there was something wrong with the medication in the first place? And what I mean by that, is I think there's a deeper understanding on the part of parents that, they're kind of caught thinking that they have to have their kids on these medications in order for them to get good grades in school and pay attention and do what they're supposed to do. That they're doing their child, a favor in having them on these medications. But at the same time, they know in the back of their minds that these drugs probably are not real good for them. And so, at every opportunity, they go ahead and take them off. In fact, I see a lot of parents, and I've talked to a lot of parents who have come in and have mentioned that their child is taking these medications. And consistently, I hear the same thing. And it's that I really don't like my child being on the medication, but they need to be. They have to be in order to be manageable. So I want to tackle this from a couple different angles. Number one, the problem from the parent side. Of course, from the parent side, who most of you listening to this are going to be the parents. It's not the kids, who are picking up this disc. So from the parent's angle, I get it. It's, kids are a handful as they are, just being a kid in itself. But the world has changed, in that these days, it's very much more common for both parents to be working. And so with both parents working, it leaves a lot less time that they can be at home playing with the kids. Now, I've got two boys myself, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I know that, when I come home, they're excited as all get out to get to spend time with me and hang out with me, and they absolutely love the weekends, because they get that quality time to get to hang out and just play and, and wrestle on the beds and, and play in the backyard and play catch and play football. And did I mention tackling dad and all that kind of stuff? They love that stuff. And so it's really, in today's world with both parents working, you see how much less kids get of that. And I think we really need to pay a lot of clout and attention to the quality time with our kids, because it's bigger than we think to them. And so when they don't get that, they tend to not handle themselves as well. They tend to go a little bit more rambunctious, but it's understandable. They're just looking for that outlet, and that's a rare outlet. But when they don't get that outlet, then they're basically put into environments that are closed environments. And what I mean by that is, you give your kid to a daycare center, and the daycare center does not want to deal with the level of activity, excitement, and energy that you might be able to deal with at home. Your kids, you don't necessarily have a problem with your kids tackling you and wrestling on the bed and all that kind of stuff. But the daycare center, they don't appreciate that. They don't want to do that with your kids. They're not their kids, so it's understandable. But if you see that your kids never get that kind of time, though, you can start to see why that rebellion comes in, why that opposition comes in, where all the energy stems from, and all the other sides to the coin. And the parent, just sees it as, it's a giant hindrance because we have to work, we have to pay bills, we have to, put a house over their heads and keep food in their mouths and pay for their drugs. So we have to be able to focus on what we need to focus on, and the ADHD symptoms, they just become problematic in life. So the parent really just wants one thing. They want to have the situation manageable for somebody else, primarily, and secondarily for themselves, so that they can accomplish their needs and goals that they have. From the child's perspective, they see it from the same angle, just slightly differently. They see their parents busy, but they don't want their parents busy. They want to play. They want to have fun. They want to burn energy. They want to play. They want to romp. They want to harass. They want to do all the things that a kid is going to do. And so they don't get that outlet, and it just stems the problem even further. So it's you can start to understand in most situations why all this comes into play, and then a parent gets frustrated, and then a parent starts using more vocal, more voicing, and all the other sides to that, and punishment and everything, and then the kid, sees that they're not getting what they want, and still they're getting punished for it, and it becomes a vicious cycle that keeps going on and on and on until finally somebody ends up in a doctor's office, and like a patient walks into my office, and the child is sitting there, defiant, and doesn't want to talk and doesn't want to be there because they don't think anything's wrong with them. And the parent is talking openly in front of the doctor about how their child just won't behave and won't listen, and, is just obnoxious, and, needs to be on the medications, and the doctors have diagnosed him with ADHD and everything else. And the kid's sitting here listening to all this, and all of that is input into their little fragile minds. So you can see the degree of the problem, and now we add in the big factor, which is the factor of what the industry wants, and the industry wants millions and millions of kids taking their drugs. The reality, you guys, is the drug companies really don't care too much how your kid acts at the end of the day. That is not their primary objective. Their primary objective as a business is to make their stockholders happy. And the way that they do that is they sell a lot of drugs. So let's say you have a population of majorly ADHD symptom kids and a population of minorly ADHD symptom kids, and then a normal population. Well, it would make sense that that we would just want to fix the ones that really needed assistance. So the drug companies would want to sell drugs to the major. But I want to tell you that is not the objective of the drug companies. In fact, they don't want just the major. They don't want just the minor. They want the normal kids too. The more drugs that they sell, just like Coca-Cola sells Coke and Skittles sells candy, they want to sell more of their product. So we start off with these drugs like Ritalin and amphetamines and all these other kind of medications that, are derived from major illegal medications. Ritalin was derived actually from cocaine. It's got a very similar structure to it. If you put the two side by side, you can see you can see the visible the visible comparison between the two. And it has an effect basically like a mild cocaine. That's why you hear people say that ADHD medications, they refer to them as kitty crack or kitty cocaine, because that's where it comes from. And now you have the new class of drugs, which are amphetamines. Of course, you recognize that name from crystal meth, methamphetamine. And so these drugs are based on major problematic drugs that have, caused all kinds of known problems, but now we've altered them, chemically changed them, put a white label on them, and said that they're okay now because they're actually prescribed. But there's not really a whole lot of difference. A drug is a drug, and when you get a kid on, you remember the old campaigns where they used to have us wear stickers and little dog tags and stuff like that say no to drugs. Well, now I don't see how we can even talk about that, because we're told to say no to drugs, but then our parents are sending us to school every day on drugs. We go to the nurse's office, and the nurse's office gives us drugs. We go to the doctor, and the doctor says take drugs. So you can see how it might be just a little bit confusing to a kid to tell them say no to drugs, and then they're constantly being pushed drugs. I want to suggest a very good movie on this topic. If you really want to see the gross details of what ADHD is doing in our population to our kids, watch the movie Generation RX. That's Generation RX. Just a phenomenal movie that will just scare the socks off you. It shows you all the statistics about ADHD and the medications and the real problem that we're fighting, not in a disorder or a disease, but the fight that we have against the marketing of ADHD. It's incredible. So, once you've seen that movie, you can kind of start to see why we see this life of a post-ADHD kid. These kids, you can really see a difference in them. I have a lot of patients that stem all the way from current kids that are on the medications to I have adults now that spent their entire childhood on medications, and what you see is a tendency towards drug use. I've seen this consistently that that there's a lot of these adults now have struggles with using drugs, and to me, that's not really a surprise, because they grew up their entire life on drugs, on medications, and were told that they were good for them. So, seriously, how bad can it be to just use, a couple drugs for recreation? I take them every day. So of course that turns into a problem on its own, just because that's what they've been conditioned to. Okay? But the other factor to it is that these drugs, again, I want to remind you, are derived from drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine. Well, we know that those classes of drugs are addictive. And so what we found with a lot of these ADHD medications is that it's the exact same thing. They are addictive. And honestly, even the ones that they say are not addictive, I can't say that I believe that. I don't. In fact, I can tell you, I flat out don't believe that. I don't think that a drug that's derived from a narcotic cannot possibly be, even in some measure, shape, or form, addictive. So they have this tendency towards drug use. Usually these kids, if not they have drug problems, doesn't really matter, but they have self-image issues, regardless, because they've been told their entire life that they're defective, that there's something wrong with them, that they're not the same as other kids. If you were told from the time that you were young that you had a disease, you had a dysfunction, you couldn't pay attention, you couldn't behave, you can't, well, guess what? You're probably going to grow up thinking, I can't. And so we see this self-image issue where, they really struggle trying to have respect for themselves. And so, I would never want that life for my kid, and I know no parent out there that I know at least would ever want that for their kid, and if you have a child that's struggling with these disorders, I know that's not what you want for your kid, and you don't want to have to, but it's one of those areas where it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So let's look at a couple of the studies on ADHD, or as far as these studies on ADHD as a whole. The thing I want to point out to you about this is that there are literally no studies on ADHD showing any biological, chemical, or physiological link whatsoever, meaning that they cannot test for it. They cannot prove that it exists. Now you might say, wait a second, hang on, my doctor prescribed my son, my daughter with ADHD. How can you say that there's no test for it? Well, the test, if you remember, is actually a questionnaire. It's a questionnaire that asks questions like, does your child seem to be hyperactive? Does your child have problems paying attention in school? Does your child seem to be defiant? And questions like this, which, when I came up in school, my teachers couldn't stand me because I was not one to listen in class. I couldn't listen. I couldn't pay attention. I literally sat at my desk and drew all day long. And then as I got into high school, I went from drawing to I started to sleep more. So yes, your doctor actually slept in school. And so I know that if those medications were really as dominant in my school at the time that I was going through, I would have been one of the first kids to be prescribed these medications. But you calculate that out and you figure the fact that now I'm a doctor, I was apparently smart enough to get through school and to finish with an undergraduate degree and to get a postgraduate degree as a physician. So it doesn't seem like there's as much a problem there as what most would think, But what really was going on is that I was not interested. I just simply wasn't interested in what they were teaching. Therefore, I didn't care to pay attention. If you don't see a relevance in what you're doing, it's kind of hard to follow through on that. Tell a kid to stand in place and start bouncing up and down. It's only going to take 10 seconds before they ask, well, why am I doing this? And if you can't give them a good reason, they're going to think, well, I don't need to do this. This is kind of silly. But imagine if you expected them to do that every single day. The kid doesn't know any difference between bouncing up and down on their toes or doing their math homework. They don't necessarily see the connection. They don't see that it's going to affect their entire life. They think everybody goes to school, everybody learns the same thing, everybody gets out the same way, and then you pick what job you want to have, and that's it. They don't see all the ins and outs of it. So, going back to that, there is literally no conclusive study showing that there is any biological, chemical, or physiological indicator for ADHD as a diagnosis. And that's caused, of course, as you can imagine, a lot of problems and a lot of turmoil because parents don't want their kids on the drugs and doctors do want the kids on the drugs. They can't prove it. The parent starts asking hard questions. It puts the doctor on the spot. It caused a lot of problems for the pharmaceutical industry as a whole. So there was one study that was done that specifically looked at brain shrinkage. They went and they studied a group of ADHD kids who were declared ADHD versus normal population. And what they found is that the children that had ADHD had lesser amounts. They had less gray matter in the brain. And so they came out and they touted, we found a link. There's less brain mass in kids that have ADHD. See, they're stupid, right? They don't have the brain power because their brain is smaller. But somebody scrutinized that study and they went back and they looked at it and found all the subjects and found that they had actually been on medication for ADHD for more than 5 years. Which, if you start to make the correlation between cocaine shrinking your brain and causing destruction of gray matter and Ritalin having the possibility of destructing gray matter and shrinking the brain, you can start to see that there might be a valid connection there. So that study, of course, was quickly buried under the rug. So here's what I want to point out to you as a parent, and you might not like this. The diagnosis is fake, okay? Your child does not have ADHD. How can I say that? How can I go against what, all the doctors say and how dare I, prescribe or undiagnose what a medical doctor diagnosed by means of testing and everything? Well, it's pretty simple. I can because it doesn't exist. If the diagnosis itself doesn't really exist, then how can your child have the diagnosis? It's not about your kid or not your kid. The diagnosis as a whole does not exist. what we have is symptoms. Well, symptoms can mean all kinds of different things. They don't necessarily mean that there's a physiological, biological, or chemical problem there. And of course, considering the fact that there's no studies showing that there's any of those, we know that it is literally just symptoms. So those symptoms, are the hyperactivity and the inability to pay attention and that kind of stuff. But that still doesn't validate the diagnosis. Just because symptoms seem to correlate does not mean that there is a valid diagnosis. If you can't see it on paper or on test or, some kind of medical test, and I'm not talking about a questionnaire, if you can't see it on a medical test, then there is something wrong with the picture, especially as much as we supposedly understand about the diagnosis. And by all means, how in the world can we validate giving kids drugs that have clear and known side effects without an absolute rock solid diagnosis and proof, absolute rock solid proof that the drugs cure that disease? How in the world can we get away with doing that? So, that is supposed to be not a moment of, slapping a parent in the face. That's meant to be a moment of encouragement to you as a parent, knowing that, there's nothing wrong with your kids. Your kids are wonderful. Your kids are healthy. Your kids are functional. And if there's something going on, then there's something underneath the surface that you have not removed in terms of an interference. So I want to give you the ADHD kid from an inside-out perspective. Your typical diet, and the reason why I say ADHD kid, when I say ADHD kid, understand I'm covering the majority of the population out there, because what we've seen is as the majority of the population has moved in one direction, all these diagnoses have popped up with it. So the typical diet is a classic. You look at the typical diet of a kid, they're drinking soda and drinking juice and drinking more soda and sweet tea and all these other sugary drinks and Gatorade and all this other stuff that's loading sugar into their bodies. When was the last time that most kids just drank water? And if you ask, if you look at most kids as a whole, I would highly doubt that there's even 10% of kids that drink more water than they do anything else. Our kids, they might have some juice in the morning and might have something else later in the day, like an iced tea or something like that. But the majority of the day, and when I say iced tea, I'm talking about unsweet iced tea. Unless it's Ruby Tuesday, we might go and, we might get them a fruit tea with a little bit of the fruit in it, but hold the sugar syrup. So the rest of the day, though, they are drinking water. That's all they have. They actually have their little clean canteens or little stainless steel bottles that they carry around with them everywhere they go. My wife makes sure that they always have those in hand, and they're drinking water literally everywhere they go. So as that's just drink now. Now we get into the diet. For breakfast, it's sugary cereal with cow's milk on it. For lunch, they're getting school lunches, which are nachos and cheese, and pork hot dogs, and macaroni and cheese, and pizza that looks like cardboard with fake mozzarella on it, and their little carton of milk on the side, or a carton of high fructose corn syrup juice on the side, which I can still practically, when I say that, taste it still today from my childhood. So there's we look at what their diet looks like in school. There was that show a while back from I think his name was Jamie Oliver, where he went into the schools and started changing the school lunch programs. What a genius show. I love that, and I don't even know if it's on anymore. We don't watch TV, but I really wish that it was, because that taught a very, very good and important lesson to us as a nation. And then they get home at night, and a lot of cabinets are full of stuff like Oreo cookies and Little Debbie snacks, and in the freezer is Totino's pizza rolls. And they have they have a bottle of Mountain Dew in there. They might grab a can of Mountain Dew, and all this stuff. I know it because this is the way that I grew up too. I grew up in the same situation. My parents didn't know anything about, this advanced nutrition. They didn't see, we just didn't see the problems back then that we see now, because that overconsumption of sugars took time to put into effect. So that's the typical diet. Very little fruits and vegetables and things, and grass-fed meats and stuff like that is actually healthy. Most kids would rather die than eat an avocado. Typical exercise. When you look at the exercise, even gym has gotten almost completely kicked out of most schools. They don't really do a whole lot of PE anymore. Our PE used to be like an hour, that kids would play outside. But now I think it's like 15, 20 minutes in some cases. Or, if it is PE, it's games where, half the class might be sitting there the entire time while the other half is playing. There's it's usually very organized. It's not just send kids out on the playground and let them run. So our kids typically don't get as much in school, but then we get home, and what does everybody have at home? Video games. So our kids are sitting around and they're playing video games all day long, and a video game keeps their attention, which, that's ironic, isn't it? Most ADHD kids, you put them in front of a video game, and they have absolutely no problem paying 100% attention to it and doing everything necessary for, an hour or two. It's very rare that you'll find a kid that can't pay attention to a video game. So that should tell us something very important. But moral of the story, they just don't really get a whole lot of exercise. Then you look at their typical patient history. Usually these kids have been vaccinated. They have a history of, growing up on, high amounts of cow's milk in their diet, being bottle fed with either cow's milk or soy protein, fake milk, so they're not breastfed. Their diet has been off for a long time. They eat candy all the time. You see these histories, and you see things like allergies and things like intestinal problems and all these kind of little subsidiary issues that we don't necessarily connect, but what they all point back to is that the body is not functional as a whole. Okay, so what do we do 5 essentials wise for the care of these ADHD kids? Okay, in terms of the 5 essentials, the number 1 essential is mindset. Okay, maximize your mindset, because think about how important that is for these kids that have ADHD. Because the kid is told that they're defective, there's something wrong with them, they can't heal, they need to take medications for the rest of their life. When most kids, they don't want to believe that. Most kids, they want to believe that they're able, they're capable, they're special, there's something unique about them. Uniqueness is one of the essential qualities of being a human being. People drive and thrive for uniqueness. And these kids just feel like they're defective, so you've got to get these kids first and foremost to realize that they are able to heal. They are powerful beyond anything that we can imagine. These kids are built with a purpose and a mission and a vision, and that vision starts when they're young. They're developing that today. If you ask my 6-year-old, is he strong? Is he powerful? Is he a champion? He might kind of shy back a little bit, but you bet your britches he knows that he is a champion. He knows and he believes it. And what we find is that he goes around encouraging other people. He believes it so much in himself that he goes around and he encourages others and is like, "You're a champion. You're powerful. You're healthy." He does this stuff to patients, so mindset is so incredibly powerful to know that they are able if they put the time in, if they put the effort in. They've just got to know, then that seed can form and that seed can develop. The number 2 essential is nerve supply. You've got to have maximized nerve supply because the brain and neurological connections in the body control and coordinate every single function of the entire body. If the brain and nerve system is not working at 100%, that body is not going to work effectively. you can give them a pristine diet, and the nerve system, if it's not working, is not going to transport and utilize those nutrients where they are most needed. You can be looking at toxicity as a factor, but if the nerve system is not working itself, then the body is not going to be optimally able to detoxify properly. A kid might want to do fitness, but they might be running around with their toes in, running crook-footed because they don't have an optimal spine and nerve system. But the biggest factor is just plain and simple, you cannot be healthy, not just overcoming disease, but you can't be healthy without your spine and nerve system working at 100% function. Anytime that there is any kind of distortion and deviation in the spine, that is subluxation, and that is literally shutting down organs in the body and shutting down function of otherwise what would be a healthy system. There's no way that you can be healthy that way. So nerve supply is an absolute critical component. Now, notice that nerve supply is not a chiropractic component. All these things are, you could just as well see this stuff in the medical research. In fact, most of the good, credible research that's done about chiropractic has actually come from the medical research. Nerve supply isn't something that chiropractors have coined, if you will. It's just that we happen to be very, very, very good, the best, at actually removing it. So if it's not at a chiropractor's office, where else are you going to go to make sure that your nerve system is clear and working functionally? The best you might get is a nerve conduction velocity test somewhere else. So number 3 is diet. You want to make sure that your kids aren't eating processed foods. You want to get 100% rid of soda. Now, luckily, we have a good alternative. If you guys want to treat your kids to a soda here and there, they actually have a brand called Zevia, which is used. You can buy it at Fresh Market, you can buy it at Virginia's, you can buy it at the health food stores. And what Zevia is it's a soda that's basically just water in the carbonation, and then it's flavored with a stevia-based compound. So stevia, of course, is a natural herb. And so it has no glycemic effect on the body whatsoever, yet you still get to drink your soda. And I mean, they taste literally like the root beer. I love the root beer. It tastes just like a regular root beer. So, clean up the sodas, get the sodas out. Don't replace it with sweet tea or Kool-Aid. I remember as a kid, I would pull out the little packet of blue colored, bright blue colored Kool-Aid, dump it in, get out the sugar and dump 2 cups of sugar into this big container, and then just mix it all up and drink 3 glasses of it. Oh my goodness. It makes my head hurt even thinking about it. So get rid of the sugary drinks, stick the kids to water, maybe a little bit of good 100% juice in the morning, not the juice like Minute Maid and stuff like that is, high fructose corn syrup on the side of the label. But real juice, real stuff like orange juice, apple juice, unfiltered apple juice, cherry juice, stuff like that. So you want to make sure that it's the real deal. And then throughout the rest of the day, just do water and maybe some unsweet tea flavored with stevia. So that's what you want to do as far as drinks go. As far as the food goes, get rid of food colors, processed foods, processed meats, get rid of pork, get rid of shrimp, get rid of the meats that are toxic to the body. If you haven't yet listened to it, get back on drbucknell.info. That's drbucknell.info and download the audio To Eat or Not to Eat. It's a fantastic audio by Jim Staley that talks about what meats we should and should not be eating. And I mean, this stuff is 100% validated in the medical research. We know that these foods like pork and shrimp are incredibly toxic and indigestible to the body. Get rid of margarine and the bad oils. Kids eating Lay's potato chips. All these oils clog up the system and they don't allow you to process your food properly. And that just goes for any kind of processed food altogether. If it comes in a box or a package, you probably do not want it. And then in addition to that, you want to watch out for foods like MSG, monosodium glutamate. MSG is hidden in all kinds of different foods, but it's there as a flavor additive. It actually stimulates the brain. It's classified as a excitotoxin to the brain that makes your brain think. Yes, it doesn't really taste that good. It just makes your brain overexcite so that you think that it tastes good. The next wave, as we move into the future, that is coming, is they're working on developing basically chemicals that make your brain think that you're eating different particular flavors. So one day they might be able to make a potato chip that when you eat it, it tastes exactly like a chocolate-covered banana. It's incredible that we're able to do these things, but unfortunately it's incredibly destructive at the same time. So clean up the diet. If you need more help on the diet aspect of it, pick up the Maximize Living Nutrition Plans book. It's got all kinds of recipes in it. It's got the what you can and cannot eats in it, all the nutrition rules. It is just a fantastic book. If you want more information on how to shop, there's a couple shopping audios on the website drbucknell.info that tell you what to buy, what not to buy, a lot more of these rules. But clean up the diet. Number 4 is optimizing oxygen and lean muscle. You want to make sure that your kids are getting ample amounts of exercise. If a kid is overexcited, like if our kids are overactive, I don't sit there and try to tell them to calm down and scream and yell at them to stop. Instead, I want to get them running around even more. Yep, that actually sounds counterproductive the way that we're taught, but if you get them to run around more, then they'll actually burn off that energy and they'll calm back down. But the only time that I really see that is necessary is after we cheat, and we go and we get dessert somewhere, or we let them have some kind of a snack that they don't normally get to eat, something like that. Within an hour, we can immediately see the difference in their behavior as that sugar rushes through their body. So fitness is incredibly powerful in its ability to get you well, get you to heal, get the kids stronger, but more importantly, because muscles actually drive every function in the entire body, then it actually helps speed up metabolism and everything else, and help break down and move things where they need to be moved within the body. The last one is toxicity, and that kind of goes hand in hand with diet, but not so much. The other toxins that you have to look out for is stuff like not having a bath filter or a shower filter, and your kids are being exposed to massive amounts of chlorine and fluoride every day. Drinking fluoridated water, the household chemicals that you spray around your house every week. Every time that you wash your house, you clean your house, and you spray those chemicals, they don't go anywhere. They stay exactly where you sprayed them because you are inside. You're in a closed environment. So if you consistently do that for the next 10 years, you can imagine how much chemical you're going to have in your house. So you've got to get rid of the environmental toxins, but then you've also got to get rid of the toxins that you're putting inside of their body in terms of medications. Kids are taking more medications than ever, and we know that these things are toxic. How can you expect the body to heal and function if you're inducing toxicity by giving them drugs? It's completely counterproductive, but you know what? It keeps kids on medications. So this is the way that we deal with ADHD kids in our practice. We deal with those 5 different essentials. We make sure that the parents know what to do, they have the tools to do it, and that just as importantly, that the kid understands what they're doing and the kid knows what they need to do in order to get well and progress. And you know what? Usually they're right on board and they want to get off the medications. They want to do better. So my question to you would be then, who do you know that actually has a kid on ADHD medications? Who do you know that the parents don't necessarily have them on the medications, but you know that they're on the way, or they probably should be on the way in your mind, because the kids are hyper, they're overactive, they're going crazy all the time. And if we don't get that child into a sane environment, a sane level of treatment, then really you've got to be worried for that kid that they're just going to end up in the same place as everybody else. And you can't let that happen. So who do you know that you can bring to the next community dinner? We have these community dinners once a month. So every month we do these dinners where we go through all the details. And, this is your opportunity to get these people helped. This is your opportunity to get them saved, literally. And so the next community dinner is on, I'm not going to give you the next dinner upcoming because obviously this audio is going to be on, online for a long time. But know that we do have these dinners, and all you have to do is look up our email or send me an email at drbucknell@gmail.com. That's drbucknell@gmail.com. You can call our office at 251-607-0040. You can come to a dinner by setting it up that way. If you would like to come in and have a consult and just talk to me about what we could do for your kid, I'm more than happy to do that. We offer the consultation, at no charge. And then if we need to do any additional testing and get into actual treatment, then we go from there. But we can at least, I'd be more than happy to sit down with you before we get into any kind of testing, x-rays, anything like that. Sit down with you in advance and just make sure that you know how the process goes. So there's a lot of hope for these kids, and there's a lot of hope for us as a nation, if we start treating this situation correctly. For the rest of those that aren't as fortunate to be able to know what to do, guys, I beg of you to make sure that they actually have that option, because these kids' lives are being literally destroyed, and we just can't let that happen anymore. So I thank you guys for listening. Again, get on drbucknell.info, or if you are not a current patient, call our office at 251-607-0040 and get set up for either a consultation with me or to come to the next dinner and learn more. So we're here to help. We're here to serve you, and and to, most importantly, save these kids. So let's do this together. Let's get our community well. These are kids that go to your kids' schools, and you should be just as equally concerned about them, because any day could happen that a kid taking Ritalin or one of these other drugs walks into your kid's school and starts shooting a gun. So that's really all I have for you on that note, and it's just a matter of we've got to act. We've got to stop just following the same protocol of giving these kids drugs and hoping that their problem goes away, because it's not going to go away until we fix their health and get them actually healthy and well. So to your health in the future, protect life and maximize potential.